Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Museum Munchkins. I'm Mr. Nick, and today we are talking all about these animals, the cicadas. And we're going to start off by singing a cicada song if you want to stand up on your feet. So this is a song about cicadas and about how loud they are. I don't know if you've ever heard a cicada before, but cicadas kind of make a buzzing sound. And we're going to make a buzzing sound too with our lips during this song. So they don't make a sound like a bee buzzes around, like bzzz. They make a much, much louder sound, so we're going to use our lips. And we're not going to spit, but we're going to kind of vibrate our lips back and forth like this. Can you try doing that? Oh, very good. So we want to make sure we're not spitting around. We're only buzzing our lips. We're not pushing a bunch of air and stuff out of our mouth while we're doing that. We're just sort of making our lips buzz back and forth like this. Very good. And so we're going to be doing that during our song as we learn about cicadas, we sing about cicadas. All right, so this song you might recognize as the song Bingo, a song about a dog, but I changed it to be about cicadas. And so instead of clapping when we hear a letter or when we get rid of a letter, when we're saying the cicada name, we're going to instead of clapping. Are you ready? All right, let's try it really slow to start off so we can all learn the song. There are some insects very loud. Cicadas are their name. And now we're going to spell the word cicada. C-I-C-A-D-A-C. I-C-A-D-A-C. I-C-A-D-A. Cicadas are their name. Very good. And now we're going to take away the first letter C and try our buzzing sound. Are you ready? There are some insects very loud. Cicadas are their name. I-C-A-D-A. 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 Cicadas are their name. Very good, you got it. So every time we take away a letter, we're going to make our cicada buzzing sound. Here we go. There are some insects very loud. Cicadas are their name. C-A-D-A. 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 Cicadas are their name. There are some insects very loud. Cicadas are their name. A-D-A. 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 Cicadas are their name. Very good. Let's go a little bit faster. Are you ready? There are some insects very loud. Cicadas are their name. D-A. D-A. D-A-D-A. Cicadas are their name. Ooh, I went a little too fast for me. That's okay. Sometimes we make mistakes. There are some insects very loud. Cicadas are their name. A. 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 Cicadas are their name. All right, I think we got rid of all the letters in our name cicada now. So now we're just going to make our buzzing noise. Are you ready? There are some insects very loud. Cicadas are their name. Cicadas are their name. Very good. That was some excellent cicada buzzing you did during our cicada song. I'm going to set my guitar down so we can learn all about these animals. Let me grab my cicada again. Have you ever seen a cicada before? So cicadas are a type of insect that we find all around the world. So there are about 3,000 different types of cicadas that we find, and we find them all across the world. We find some around here where we live in Kenosha, but we find them all around the planet. Mostly they really like tropical areas where it's really warm and kind of wet outside. They have a wet climate, like where we find rainforests. We find lots of cicadas in rainforests. But that's where they mostly like to live, is in those tropical areas. But we do find some cicadas up here in Kenosha too. And this is just one of the types of cicadas that we find around here. So this is a type of cicada called a dog day cicada, which there are actually lots of different types of dog day cicadas, but they're called that because they come out during a time of the year called the dog days of summer, right around now when summer is getting to be its hottest, as that's when the cicadas like to come out. So cicadas are really interesting animals that have been around since the time of the dinosaurs. They're about as old as the dinosaurs, about 240 million years old. That's how long cicadas have been around on our planet. And cicadas are a type of insect. You might have guessed that already. So cicadas, because they're insects, they have two antennae, which are kind of little sensory things that stick off the front of their heads, and they use those to smell. So they're kind of like their nose. They have two eyes. Can you find your eyes? They have 6 legs. Where are your legs? Can you point to your legs? Maybe move them around a little bit. They have 6 legs. They have a head, a thorax, that's the middle of their body, and an abdomen, that's kind of the bottom of their body, and they have 4 wings on their bodies. They're really interesting little insects. And when a cicada first hatches out of its cicada egg, they're very small, and their parents lay their eggs way up in trees and in bushes and things. So when they first hatch, the baby cicadas fall from their eggs down onto the ground, and then they quickly get to digging. Do you like to go digging? Maybe in a sandbox or at the beach? Do you like to dig a hole with a little shovel? Well, baby cicadas are really good at digging. They have special hands or special arms on the front of their body that are designed just for digging. So let me see if I'm going to grab this one here so we can see it a little bit better. But you can see just how big and strong the front of this cicada's arms are that are great for digging. They have lots of little spikes and things on them. And a baby cicada is called a nymph. So cicada nymphs are really good at digging, and they dig way down deep into the soil around the bushes and the trees where they hatch, and they find a nice cozy spot by the tree's roots, and they nestle up, and that's where they stay, and that's where they grow up, is underground in a little hole that they dig for themselves right near the roots of the tree. And that's because cicada nymphs love to eat tree sap. Do you like to eat tree sap too? Sometimes I do on my pancakes. Did you know that maple syrup that we put on pancakes is made from tree sap? So people, when they make a maple syrup, they put a lot of other things in it too, and it doesn't just come out of the tree like that, but that's how cicada nymphs like it. They like it really sweet sap that comes out of the roots of the trees that they live right next to. So they live underground all year long. After they hatch in the fall, in the summer, they live underground all through that. They live underground through the fall, through the winter, through the spring, through the early part of summer, and then the next summer, The cicadas use their big, strong arms to dig themselves back out of the ground, up to the top of a tree, where they cling on as hard as they can, as strong as they can. So you might have seen one of these little guys before, sitting on the side of a tree or on the side of a bush. So this is just the shell of the cicada nymph that we can find. So the cicada isn't in there anymore, but this is the shell that it leaves behind when it becomes an adult. So it climbs up there, and then it dries, its body, the outside of its body dries up, and then there's a crack, and the adult kind of squeezes its way out of this teeny tiny little shell that it's made for itself. So we call that molting when they come out of their teeny tiny little shell. So has it ever been really hard for you to take to maybe if you're out in the rain, or maybe you accidentally went in the swimming pool with some clothes on, and it's really kind of hard because your clothes kind of stick to you when they get wet? If you can imagine that, but taking off the whole outside of your body like that, that's what it's like for a cicada when they molt and they're trying to pull themselves out of this shell that's really wants to stick to their body. So when they pop out of that, though, then it's time for them to be adults. They grow their wings then. Their wings, as soon as they come out, they are all curled up inside their shell. So when they hatch out of it, their wings get to spread out, and then they dry, and then they're adult cicadas. And adult cicadas are very, very noisy. So cicadas come out every year, every summer, and most cicadas only go underground for about a year. But there are some cicadas like this one here, which is called a 17-year cicada. That means this cicada nymph lived underground for 17 years before it crawled up out of the ground to hatch into an adult, to molt into an adult. So that's this one here. So this is a cicada that I caught all the way back in the year 2004. So that was a long time ago, 16 years ago, actually. So next year, the babies that these cicadas laid when they were around will be hatching, and there will be a lot of them in some parts of the country. So when adult cicadas are adults, they don't eat anything. In fact, when they hatch out of their shell, adult cicada's mouth, which is kind of like a long needle, is stuck to its body. So it can't move. So you never have to worry about a cicada biting you because they can't bite. Their mouth is stuck to their body and they can't move it around. So they don't eat anything, they don't bite, but they do, like we said, make a lot of noise. Do you remember what noise they made in our song? Yeah, they kind of made a buzzing noise like so, and they make that noise with a very special part of their body called a timble. Can you say that word? Timble. Can we say it? Oh, it kind of sounds like the word timber that a lumberjack says when they chop down a tree. Could we say timble like we were a lumberjack? Timble! So the timble is a small little thing underneath their wings, and they have two of them. And they're kind of like the top of a drum. And the cicadas can make those vibrate really, really fast, just like we were making our lips vibrate really fast when we were buzzing them like that in our cicada song. So that's how they make such a loud noise. But you know what's really interesting is only the boy cicadas have a timble. So only the boy cicadas are the ones who make noise. So all those noisy cicadas you might be hearing around right now are the boy cicadas, and they're calling to all the girl cicadas going, "Hey, what's up?" And they want them to come over by them. So that's why they're making that big, loud noise with their timbles. Now, cicadas can be kind of big. Like this one here, this is about a normal size of a cicada that we find around here in Kenosha. The other one was pretty small. This 17-year cicada is a little bit smaller. So they can be kind of big and kind of scary, like we said, because they're so big and they can fly and they make lots of noise. But like we said, cicadas aren't really anything that we have to worry about. They're just kind of loud and they fly around. And they are actually food for a lot of different animals. Lots of birds and little mammals like to eat cicadas. So even though they're kind of noisy, they're really important for the environments that they live in. And you know what? I have a story today that was written by a mom whose daughter was a little nervous about all those cicadas coming out 16 years ago. Our story today is called Cecily Cicada, and it's written by Keita Helmetag Murdoch and Patsy Helmetag, her mom. So we're going to read, I'm going to move my cicadas out of the way here, and we're going to read our story, Cecily Cicada. In her dreary earthen hole, 'neath the sassafras tree, on Hudicoper Street in Washington, D.C., lived a hopeful nymph cicada, waiting for the time she could crawl up top and feel the sunshine. There she is. There's Cecily the cicada in that little tiny hole down by the tree roots. The last thing she remembered before digging her hole was her solemn mama saying, "Cecily, be bold, be patient, dear, and persevere, and never do give up, for in 17 years you'll get back to the top. In 17 years, you'll know what to do, and something amazing will happen to you." For 17 years, she waited day and night for time and temperature to be just right. 17 years is a long time to wait. Cecily ate roots, then ate some more, but eating roots was truly a bore. So she was stalwart and passed the time, doing 17 things that don't fit in this rhyme. For while she awaited that far-off day, she had to be clever and learn to play and entertain herself till the soil felt right. At 64 degrees, she could crawl up to the light. Once when thinking of things to do, a friendly worm came passing through. He said, "Why are you waiting down in this hole?" She said, "That's something I cannot control. In fact, I wish I could go up with you, but I have to wait. My waiting's not through. For 17 years I must await the day when I can come outside and play." One evening in May, she awoke with a start. This was the moment. She knew in her heart. Somehow she knew she must go to the top. She began digging, and she did not stop. Her head popped out in the dim moonlight, but her climbing continued that starry night. After so many years, she felt so free that she climbed up the bark of that sassafras tree. When she got near the top, she suddenly froze. She felt stiff from her head to her nose. She couldn't move. She was stuck in one spot. She tried to crawl and found she could not. She wriggled and wiggled with all her might, but no matter what, her feet held tight. She thought, "I have to get out of here." Her body trembled with outright fear. She began to shake. She couldn't stop shaking, when all of a sudden she heard something breaking. She heard a rip and then a crack and felt the night air on her back. She tried moving her feet and found they would. She took a step and found she could. But why had she been stuck in one place? She looked up and saw the dried brown case. Her new self was pale with wings that were green. Her skin was translucent with a beautiful sheen. When the sun came up on the beings who sleep in, Cecily's color began to deepen. Suddenly a question entered her mind. How can I leave part of me behind? That withered brown case used to be me, but now it's dried up and stuck to the tree. she saw from her branch a most curious thing, a creature like she was, with elegant wings. You look puzzled, but look around. There are hundreds of us crawling out of the ground, climbing up trees and leaving our past, spreading our wings to embrace life at last. We're leaving our old selves stuck on the trees while we fly with the ladybugs, robins, and bees. Oh, it's a wonderful thing to fly. Jump off the branch, give it a try. It was amazing. Her mom had been right, as Cecily found on that very first flight. So she got her wings and now she can fly. You know how it is if you've had to wait too long? When you've had long to wait, when that thing finally happens, isn't it great? If you've been in a dark hole, nothing is duller. Imagine emerging surrounded by color. Below her were flowers and beautiful plants, birds and dragonflies, spiders and ants. Children were playing in Glover Park, and parents were dragging them home before dark. For 2 days her red eyes took in all the sights and the sounds and the smells and of springtime delights. Then after 3 days came a glorious sound. From the bushes and treetops and all around, from male cicadas both high and low, a chorus of voices began to grow. For some humans, it might sound like a buzz, but Cecily knew just what it was. A beautiful, joyful, thankful song of creatures who'd lived in the ground for too long. Then she heard the sweetest voice, one that made her heart rejoice. Cecily looked up, and to her surprise was another cicada with stars in his eyes. When you see a cicada, please give her a smile, 'cause you may not see one again for a while. Just look at the grown-ups who's reading to you. When the cicadas come back, you'll be a grown-up too. The end. Yeah, so next year when the cicadas, the 17-year cicadas, come out, make sure you get a chance to take a look at them and to see them. I'm sure you will, because there will be so many of them, because the next time they come out, you will be so much older than when they were out this time. All right, now we're going to make a cicada craft. And then I see some of you guys have written some questions that we're going to answer today while we make our cicada craft. So today we're going to be making some noisy cicada noise makers. So what we will need for this activity, we will need one piece of paper like this. You could use any sort of paper, a paper from a notebook, or a piece of newspaper, or a piece of wax paper or parchment paper from your kitchen. So one piece of paper, I'm going to use this construction paper because we had some extra here at the museum. We'll need 2 big popsicle sticks like this, 2 Q-tips like that, and 2 rubber bands. All right. So this is going to be it's a little tricky for us to make this. And so while we make it, we're going to answer some questions. First thing, I'm going to make sure and see how big my popsicle stick is here compared to my piece of paper, because I don't need the paper to hang out on the side. So I'm going to see, I want about this much, about as wide as my finger on both sides of the popsicle stick to be showing. So I'm going to bend the paper over like that, and then I'm going to tear it so I only have that one little piece. Ooh, Ollie would like to know if there are giant cicadas. Well, there are some pretty big cicadas, but the biggest cicada is about this big when its wings are all spread out, about 7 to 8 inches. So they can get pretty big, but luckily around here in Kenosha, the biggest ones that we get are the ones that are about this size. So we don't get any giant cicadas around here, but there are some really big cicadas. All right, now I've got my paper torn, and I'm going to put that in here. and between my two popsicle sticks, just like that. So I'm kind of making like a little bit of a sandwich just to check and see the size of it. It looks pretty good to me. I can see that there's some space on both sides. Perfect. Now I'm going to do is I'm going to take my Q-tips and I'm going to find the very middle of them and I'm going to bend them in half, just like this. Ooh, Ollie would also like to know if a T-Rex would eat them. You know what? I bet a T-Rex probably wouldn't hunt any cicadas just because T-Rex was way too big and would have needed to eat so many cicadas when it was alive. But T-Rex might have eaten some cicadas if it ate another dinosaur that had eaten some cicadas, a smaller dinosaur. So there were definitely small dinosaurs that ate cicadas, but I don't think T-Rex would have been one of them. I think it would have just been too big. All right, so now this is a little bit of a tricky part. So I'm gonna take my Q-tips that I bent in half and I'm gonna put them like this on both sides of my piece of paper. And then I'm gonna make sort of a little Q-tip paper popsicle stick sandwich. So it can be a little bit tricky balancing all of that stuff together. That's why it's nice to have this nice table surface to work on, because I want a little bit of space underneath and on top of my paper for a very special reason that we'll see in just a minute. All right, I'm going to kind of pinch that like this so everything stays together. And then I've got my rubber bands so I don't have to keep holding it like this. But while I put these rubber bands on both sides, and I'm going to put them on the inside of these Q-tips. While we put these rubber bands on here, let's answer another question. So Noelle wants to know, how do they take their shell off? That is a very good question, Noelle. It's pretty interesting to watch them, actually. And if you ever find one of these little cicada shells sitting on a tree, you can look through the little crack and you can actually see all the little different individual things that needed to get pulled off of their younger bodies for their adults to come out. So they kind of, if you can kind of imagine, they're all squished together and they're stuck, and then they move when their shell cracks open. They move a little bit, and every tiny little bit that they're able to move and wiggle out of the shell a little bit, that makes that much more room inside the shell for them to move and wiggle around. And they just wiggle and wiggle and wiggle back and forth until they've wiggled enough that their body comes all the way out of the shell. It's really easy for them to get out of the shell at the very end, but getting it started can be really hard for cicadas. So sometimes, if you're lucky enough, you might catch a cicada as it's coming out of its shell, and that's a really interesting thing to watch. And it's always important that if you see that, you can watch them. But the cicadas, even though it looks like they're having a really hard time, they don't need any of our help to get out of their shells. All right, so I've got my rubber bands on both sides of my little noisemaker here. So I've got the rubber bands on the inside of my Q-tips, and there was a little bit extra, so I wrapped it around the outside too. But now I've got this little paper Q-tip popsicle stick sandwich, and I can kind of pinch the sides like this and make the inside get bigger and smaller just a little bit. If you can see that when I squeeze the sides like that, how it gets bigger and smaller, which might be an interesting experiment for us to try out in a little bit. Before I show you what to do with this now, let's answer some more questions. So Cecilia wants to know what you have the cicadas stuck on. Oh, that's very good. So these cicadas are part of my bug collection. So they all have a little pin through them to help hold them in place inside the box where I keep them. But the pin, so I don't get poked with it, and so I could show you, I stuck them on a little sponge. So the pin holds them in place on the sponge, and then I can show you them, and it's a lot easier to see them on this light colored background, since their shells are kind of darker colors like browns and blacks and greens. It's a lot easier to see those colors against this bright yellow sponge. And Ollie also wants to know if they live, how they live if they can't eat. Well, cicadas, when they live underground as nymphs, they live for a long time, or they can live for a long time because they have all that food to eat. But when the adults pop out, when they pop out of their shells and they become adults and they fly around and they're making their loud buzzing sound, cicada adults don't stick around for very long. So that's why it's always fun to see them when they are out and about. So they live off of the food that they ate before when they were underground. They build up a lot of fat in their bodies to help them fly around. And they use that energy while they're buzzing around until they run out. So, and then they don't have anything else to eat, and then we don't see the cicadas anymore. And Elle wants to know if cicadas can fly fast. Well, some cicadas can fly kind of fast, but since they're so big, they're pretty clumsy. They're pretty clumsy flyers, and they bump into things a lot. In fact, I find lots of cicadas, when I see them, upside down on their backs on the ground because they bumped into something and they fell on the ground when they were flying. So they don't really fly too fast. Certainly not as fast as we can walk, or as fast as a car can drive, or as fast as a plane can fly, but they can fly kind of fast for how big they are, maybe a few miles an hour. All right, now I'm going to show you how to use our noisemaker. So we've got this piece of paper in the middle, and that's going to be the special part of our instrument that vibrates. Do you remember how our lips were vibrating like this? Can you guys try that again? Well, now we're going to make that piece of paper vibrate, and that's going to make some noise kind of like a cicada. So all I need to do is kind of put my lips over my teeth like this, like I'm pretending I don't have any teeth. And then I'm going to put them gently on the popsicle sticks. I'm not going to bite down on them. So there's a little bit of space between the popsicle sticks and the paper. And then I'm going to That's really loud, isn't it? It's a lot louder than I can buzz my lips. But cicadas are really loud so that they can hear each other from all around, and they're able to find each other. So even though this is kind of a loud experiment, a loud activity, we can try, if I squeeze the sides, remember how we said we were going to do an experiment? If I squeeze the sides, if that changes what my cicada instrument sounds like. And you can let me know in the comments when you're squeezing the side of your cicada instrument how that sounds. All right, I want to thank you guys so much for joining us today, and I hope that you come back next week for Munchkins when we're learning all about the crab-eater seal. So it's going to be pretty fun, and I can't wait to see you guys all next week. Thanks for visiting with us today.